everybody. It's Laurie White with the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, back with another edition of Chamber TV. This is episode number 155, and today, the first in our series of election season coverage of the race for the mayor of the city of Providence. And we're very excited today to welcome Brett Smiley. He announced his campaign just this week. He is running as a Democrat, longtime member of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and we've had a lot of interaction with Brett over the years. How are you today, Brett? Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
I'm great, Laurie. Nice to see you too. Thanks for the opportunity.
So you have a long career, a long history in public service, in politics. You have been very involved in lots of activities, both on the state and local level, most recently departing as Department of Administration Director for former Governor Gina Raimondo. So from the Chamber's perspective, at least, you bring tremendous amount of experience and credentials to the race. So tell us a little bit about what is driving your campaign, what you see some of the big issues are, and just basically let's get to know you a little bit more.
Great. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm running for mayor because I believe we need to get back to the basics here in Providence. I think we have gotten distracted by some shiny new initiatives that are often better left to the state or federal government, and it has come at the expense of focusing on the things that only city government can do. Caring for our basic infrastructure, or focus on truly basic things like proper snow removal, caring for streets and sidewalks, pothole filling, cleaning up the city that is falling into disrepair, holding the state accountable for the progress of this takeover. The Providence Public Schools are currently being run by the state, but they are still one of the most important things that we can do as a city, and restoring a sense of safety. There's been an unfortunate uptick in violence lately, particularly in gun violence and violent crime, and that is a top priority for me as well. So it's these basic functions of city government to make this a place where businesses can grow and thrive, families can thrive, and people want to relocate to. So that's what I've been consistently focused on. And I think my past experience as Providence's first chief operating officer, Governor Raimondo's chief of staff, and the state director of administration make me uniquely qualified and entirely prepared on day one to get to work.
So you referenced your prior service within city government, and that was a few years ago. So let's just sort of look at things holistically. What do you think has changed in the city since you served in City Hall?
So I think we need to give credit to really the last three mayors, Cicilline, Taveras, and Elorza, for it seems like finally turning the page from some of the darker days of our past. We've had honest, ethical leadership now for a couple decades, which is great because that has kind of gotten into the fiber of the institution. I also think that the city has run small operating surpluses for many years now, actually rebuilt its rainy day fund, which is also a terrific accomplishment and not something to take lightly with a city with the underlying financial challenges that we have. On the other side of the equation, as I mentioned, it does feel like we've become distracted by some of these new initiatives. Sometimes nothing comes of them. Sometimes they're just better left to someone else. I was referencing earlier in the week the example of this universal basic income pilot program. Like, that's a very interesting policy idea, but it's a distraction. And even though it was philanthropically funded, nobody heard that. And so when I was working at the State House and the city was coming up asking for financial assistance, looking for relief on certain mandates and such, the kind of chatter in the hallways was, they've got so much money that they're just giving it away. Why do they need our help? And so I think we need a mayor who's going to be disciplined and who's not going to take advantage of every opportunity that walks by, because we have to stay focused on the things that matter most: public safety, public schools, public infrastructure.
What's your take, Brett, on what's happening in the downtown these days? I won't say the COVID pandemic is over. It's become an endemic. and there's still a lot of uncertainty about, returning to the office and the like. So, what's your take on what you see downtown these days, and what would you do differently as mayor to either, bring more people in, or manage the messaging that's coming from the city any
Sure.
different?
Downtown is still early in what I'm afraid is going to be a very slow recovery. Many of our neighborhood businesses and neighborhood shopping districts and commercial districts are actually doing quite well, but downtown needs some love and attention. A lot of that is, as you rightly point out, office workers missing. From what I hear from restaurants and hoteliers, that the weekend business is actually pretty strong. And certainly my experience, PPAC, Trinity, the Dunk, obviously it was like thrilling to see the Friars do so well and how great that was for the local economy. But during the week, particularly during the day, it's really quiet. And so the city needs to be doing more to support downtown. The way I think about it is there's kind of direct incentives, and to try to manufacture some demand or some reasons for people to come downtown, we should be looking at art events and other public events during the week, maybe skipping the weekends right now because weekends are doing okay. But then also is the other side, which is just public safety is a real concern. Public safety is a real concern downtown. And so I'm very concerned that the city has developed a reputation that it's unsafe. Now, I don't actually think that someone should think twice about coming in from the suburbs to go to dinner on Federal Hill, that they're going to be unsafe. But that reputation is persistent right now. And so what I would like to see is a much more visible presence from the police, and even from people like the Yellow Jackets with the DID, to give confidence that there's these visual signals of people in positions of authority that this is a safe place, that everyone in Rhode Island and Southeast Massachusetts should be coming to Providence for our fabulous restaurants, should be coming to the theater, to try to get some activity back into our city. Because I think it's going to be a bit of a slow road while we sort out what the future of work looks like and what the kind of new schedule for white collar workers in the city is going to be.
On that score, we're talking about the office workers and the office towers that are a bit empty these days. But the question is, I don't think anyone knows how things are going to really shake out from a hybrid work perspective. Everybody's still sort of, feeling their way along, and, no one really knows if this, virtual hybrid world is really going to stick, whether the stickiness is in fact, real and longstanding. So it begs the question, what else do you envision needs to be part of the downtown fabric, or, to sort of sop up some of that energy, and, perhaps talking about, greater housing density and the revitalization of the Superman building. Any thoughts in those directions?
Absolutely. And I think we have the potential. Make no mistake, I am hugely optimistic about our future. I think that Providence on its own is a fabulous city. I also think that there's a national trend right now where kind of smaller cities, big little cities, as I like to call them, are well positioned for growth in this next phase of our economy. And we have a bit of a head start in that downtown has been adding a lot more residences lately, and it's becoming a residential neighborhood pre-pandemic. So I think we should continue to aggressively move down that path. There's a couple residential conversions underway right now. I am a strong advocate for a redevelopment plan for the Superman building to turn it residential. I hope there's an affordability component to it. I believe that there is, but I think it is terrific. I hear a lot of feedback back and forth about the need for additional commercial space, or we should be holding out for jobs. Well, building residential units is jobs in this new economy because people are working from home. And so we're starting to see the amenities. There's a new supermarket going in on the 195 land. There's another market that's a little bit smaller than kind of a big supermarket that's happening on Washington Street that's poised to open soon. It's starting to be a place where you really can work and live downtown, and even do so without a car if that's what works for your family. And so we need to continue to push aggressively towards residential. I think the city should be thinking creatively about how to activate some of these retail storefronts, many of which are vacant or struggling, temporary installations, pop-ups, things like that, just to activate the streetscape. And then through the midst of all of this, I think the commercial leasing market will sort itself out. The good news is, maybe not for corporate bottom lines, but good for our city, is that a lot of these are long-term leases. And so it's not going to be, we're not going to hit a wall, I don't think, of corporate vacancies. It's going to be rolling. So hopefully we can kind of process that through the system, if you will, as they come up.
Are you anticipating that there will be a major announcement, some resolution of the Superman building dilemma prior to the 2022 election?
Boy, I hope so. When I was working for Governor Raimondo, we were close several times. I've been kind of outspoken, and I hate to be critical, but the building owner in the past has not always been a partner for getting this deal done. I really hope that the times have changed, and I particularly hope that in an environment of rising interest rates, that we don't waste too much time trying to negotiate the perfect deal that ends up being not viable, because by 3 more months of negotiations, the return necessary has evaporated because of interest rate increases. So let's just wrap it up and roll it out. We know there's sufficient demand for residential. We know that there's public support and the will of political leaders to get this done. So I hope that gets done sooner rather than later.
Let's build on your comments around public safety and crime. You no doubt have had many conversations with Chief Clements about the perception of crime in the area. What would be your direction to Chief Clements under a Smiley administration?
Yeah, so we have a national reputation in Providence for community policing. We're one of the only departments accredited as a community policing agency in the region, and so I've been outspoken. And a year ago, had a press conference about the need for adequate staffing and for taking some of these quality of life issues beyond just the violent crime, the shootings, which of course we take seriously, but also the ATV problem, the motorcycle problem, some of the noise complaints. All of these things are bad for business. And in the past, the feedback that I've received is that the relationship between the department and the administration is strained, and that they felt like their hands were tied. I have confidence in our police department. I think they do a good job. I think that we can always do a better job of building relationships with particularly impacted communities, but they are a national model department. And with respect to the downtown in particular, which is a particular focus of your membership, you should expect to see a more visible presence from the department downtown, in Kennedy Plaza, in Burnside Park, in the commercial districts, to restore this sense of safety, to give both office workers confidence that when they walk to their cars, that they're safe, people come in to eat, that they're going to have a safe, fun night in Providence. And just a visible presence. I mean, even things as simple as the mounted command, which used to be regularly in Kennedy Plaza, just gives confidence. And by the way, those horses and those officers are a terrific way to build relationships. You have young people and adults and kids that come up and they want to meet the horse and meet the officer. And that's how we should be policing, not in some punitive, heavy-handed way, but in a way that builds relationships, but also instills confidence and trust.
What about the predominance of panhandlers and loiterers and the like, and that sort of impression that it leaves on the city, and the tension, if you will, the philosophical tension about, okay, well, are they really doing anything wrong, and the mental health crisis versus
right.
of safety. So where do you come out walking that fine line?
Well, you're right. It is about a balance, and finding that balance is difficult. The people who have mental health needs and are either struggling with addiction or other mental health issues should get the treatment that they need. And I'm very supportive of Crossroads and particularly supportive of their proposed new development for a permanent supportive housing development immediately adjacent to their existing facility as a way to provide not just housing, but also services to help folks either find recovery or get on regular meds or meet whatever their other needs are. I also think we need to think creatively. I know in the past, these things have never been sustained, and that's part of the problem. But I know in the past, we've worked through partners like Amos House to hire folks to do snow removal from sidewalks and on overpasses, or kind of basic litter removal as a way to allow for folks to earn money as an alternative to panhandling. And so that's the one side of the balance. And the other side of the balance is that this needs to be an attractive place to do business. It needs to be an attractive place for people to come to work. And it has to be a safe city. And so in many cases, some of these folks are endangering themselves and drivers and pedestrians and bikers by being in the streets, by being in the middle of the median. And so I would like to be able to find some partnerships to provide off ramps for these folks to have some other way to make money, so that we can make our streets safer and make this a more attractive place to come to work.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the national reputation that Providence Police does have under Chief Clements and Commissioner Perry, and the work that they have done over a number of years to really strengthen the department and to put officers into the streets and to build relationships in the neighborhoods. And of course, the number of police officers in the police academy continues to be an issue. But from a chamber perspective, we really do have a great deal of appreciation to the chief and to the commissioner for the difficult work that they have to do on a day-to-day basis.
That's right. Yeah, the staffing has increased because of this recent class, which is great. Unfortunately, we've got quite a few that are eligible to retire. I think it's always a hard job to be a police officer. That's particularly true in the last several years. And so it's not unreasonable to expect that there might be a higher than average retirement rate. So we need to keep that consistent hiring going, in my opinion. And we've done a great job. The city, the last several mayors have all done a great job of continuing to diversify the force, continuing to hire candidates that understand Providence, who are from the neighborhoods, who look like the neighborhoods. And so we should stay down that path. Every class is a new opportunity for the latest training. And so I don't see that as a problem. I see that as an opportunity. And I'm committed to staying at a responsible level of staffing with folks who will maintain this reputation that you rightly point out is excellent.
You mentioned retirees, so that's a perfect segue to our next topic, which is what to do about the very significant unfunded pension liability in the city of Providence that essentially crowds out and is projected over the course of the next decade or so to really crowd out needed investment, needed spending. How do we get the pension system under control? And there is a pension obligation bond proposal that will go before the voters in June, as you well know, and also a piece of legislation at the State House that would allow for a pension obligation bond to stabilize the system and begin to, hopefully find some balance. True, there is some risk as interest rates are beginning to rise, but the question for the long term is, most proposals of this nature do have some risk attached to it, and the risk of doing nothing is also a very, I would describe it as almost as an existential risk in and of itself. So, pension obligation bond, your point of view on it?
Yeah, so I see the pension obligation bond as a valuable tool in the toolbox. I think you're right that there's a huge risk to doing nothing. There's also risk with pension obligation bond. I applaud the work that the Chamber, along with the Providence Foundation and RIPEC, did in participating in the process. I think that the proposal has gotten a lot better because of that process. Some of the, what have been described as guardrails are good in that it helps protect us against going forward, if the interest rate environment's not favorable, and deploying the assets, over time to benefit from some dollar cost averaging. But it's still just a tool. I've actually been advocating that we potentially use it as part of a move to get into the state system. I really don't think Providence needs to have its own fund and be in the pension business anymore. It's not huge money, but it is meaningful nonetheless in a system where every dollar matters. That, we're paying for our own financial advisors, our own bankers and lawyers to get substantially similar, if not identical, advice that the state is getting. We would benefit from some economies of scale there. We also, in my mind, perhaps most importantly, could help protect against this kind of thing from ever happening again. I know, but maybe not everyone listening knows, a majority of the problem that we're talking about is an unfunded liability that was created 30 years ago by past mayors, primarily one mayor, skipping payments and giving benefits that were unaffordable the day they were granted. And so by getting into the state system, and I don't think me or any of the people that's running this year is going to skip a payment, but some future mayor, another decade or two from now, might start skipping payments again. And then the taxpayers of Providence are back in the same dilemma that they're in right now. If we were in MERS, we would protect against the ability for a mayor to skip a payment, because the state would just deduct other state aid to make sure that the state system was made whole by what was the retired payment. I've heard some feedback to say, well, that's not possible. It's not true. We would negotiate our way in. Central Falls recently joined the state system. They had similar funding challenges, and they have a different benefit structure than other municipalities. And so it's all a negotiation. But I think that the POB is part of a plan. It's not a plan. It's not the entire plan.
Relative to the legislation that's pending now, are you planning to weigh in on that bill?
I'm not. I've had some one-on-one conversations with legislative leaders who've sought my opinion. I'm obviously looking very closely to see what the taxpayers, residents of Providence, do in this referendum. I was asked if I'm planning on voting. Yes, I am. But I do think it's important that the voters in Providence have a say. That was a terrific addition. It was not a requirement in the initial proposal, to make sure that residents are educated about what they're about to take on. And I also trust the legislative process that they'll do their proper vetting and think about what other adjustments may or may not need to be made.
Moving along to the issue of Providence schools, another very challenging, thorny, difficult legacy issue facing the next mayor. Where do you come down on the notion of, the state takeover? Have we made sufficient progress? Do we have the right leaders in place within the Providence School Administration to really move the needle? How do we picket this in a way that really tries to deliver some change in test scores and results and proficiency?
Right. So, I've been pretty publicly on the record as having supported the takeover. I still do. I was a part of Governor Raimondo's administration when we started it. It's unfortunate that, kind of a series of events that I don't think are anybody's fault happened. The pandemic hit, we lost the governor, we ended up losing the superintendent. And so I don't believe that the takeover has made sufficient progress. Again, that's not necessarily an indictment of anyone, but it's where we are. So I would call the work incomplete, to be sure. But there is an articulated turnaround plan. I support it. As mayor, I would work hopefully collaboratively, but if necessary, I would advocate quite strenuously to hold Wright accountable to delivering on the changes that were promised. I was disappointed in the teachers union contract that was signed by the governor. I think it was a missed opportunity. But the good news is that we're going to be back at it again next year. It was a 3-year contract, and there was some retroactivity. And so we'll be negotiating again next year. There's more progress that needs to be made there. And in the midst of all of this, I've been, quite clear that I support the alternative and the option of high quality charter seats. It's been a pretty dramatic expansion in the number of seats authorized. I want to see those seats get filled. There's a huge demand in Providence for them. There's a wait list that, for me, is often kind of the only metric that matters when asked about charters. It's like, look how many families are trying to get their kids into it. And it is, in my mind, very much an equity issue. Wealthy families have been exercising some school choice for quite some time, in that they can afford to send their kids to private schools. Majority of the families in Providence don't have that same option, and their only option now is through the charter system, and they like those choices. And so in the midst of continuing to make progress on the turnaround plan, I'll also fight to make sure that those options remain.
What about some of the, more out-of-the-box solutions that you hear about lately, with school hours that start much earlier, that extend much later into, the early evening, if you will, a longer school year in addition to a longer school day, and really more comprehensive, wraparound experience for students that have parents that, that are working, that may have multiple jobs, that may have, various, rhythms within different family rhythms that make it very difficult to, to enforce and get kids into the classroom with tardiness and the like. Do you favor any solutions such as that? And how would the Providence Teachers Union, in your opinion, judge a proposal somewhat like that?
So I kind of on the spectrum of less dramatic, I do think that the studies are quite clear that a longer school day and a longer school year result in better results. And so that's something that should be negotiated through the contract, was one of the things that I would put in the category of missed opportunity in this current contract. In terms of the slightly more radical ideas, I would say globally that I think Providence has, and not that everyone believes this, but I think there's many people and many superintendents in the past, we've had this revolving door of superintendents, that we've kind of trying to make Providence like Barrington or East Greenwich. And our families and students are not like Providence and East Greenwich. And I think we should acknowledge that. And that doesn't mean accept lower standards, not at all. It just means that I think we do need to be willing to be creative and different with how we meet our families and students' needs. So for example, at the high school level, we have a real problem with absenteeism. And if you look at that absentee data, when you get under it, a lot of it is because our students, many of our students, are going to work after school because they need to make money. And so they're not going home and doing homework and getting ready for school the next day. They're going to go work in a restaurant or somewhere else where they can go make money for themselves and their families. And then they're coming to school the next day tired, unprepared, or late. And so we need to be looking at things like, dramatically alternative schedules, as you point out, different ways to earn credits, and then really around experiential learning opportunities where students can make money during the day. One of the kind of more heart-touching moments with serving with Governor Raimondo is she had started a program, a partnership between Electric Boat and Coventry High School, where high school students were going to learn at Electric Boat. They were learning about math and science in a real world, very tangible way. They were getting paid to do so. And they had a very good prospect of a job there when they graduated. We should be doing much more of those kind of partnerships in Providence to both meet our students' very real kind of life needs, also help them see how their learning relates to the real world, and then actually addressing some of the biggest challenges we have around absenteeism and lack of preparedness. So I do think we need to get creative, and we should do it in a way that acknowledges the economic and just life reality of our families.
We only have a couple of minutes left. We are talking to Brett Smiley. Brett is running for mayor of the city of Providence as a Democrat. And we've been talking about all sorts of issues that will confront the next mayor of the capital city. So as we wrap up, Brett, let's talk a little bit about taxes, the tax burden, commercial and residential property tax. Again, another difficult issue, and one that directly impacts the downtown core and our ability as a community, as a business community, to bring jobs into the city and generate investment.
Right. So, particularly, we could talk about residential property taxes for another hour, but specifically on the commercial tax issue, which is of most interest to your membership, I know that our commercial property tax rate is not competitive. I think, it's been good. The city, in the midst of real financial challenge, has been able to freeze that rate for a decade now, which is better than increases, but we still have more work to be done. We have one economic development tool in Providence, which is the Tax Stabilization Agreement. And they're good. And I've supported them when I worked in city government. I helped negotiate the special TSA for the 195 development in both city and state government. And it's a way to acknowledge the real lack of competitiveness to try to get new things built in Providence. But I do believe that we should be working on two things. One is making progress to actually lower the commercial property tax rate, because the TSA, while good to stimulate new development, doesn't do anything to help the burden on existing properties and existing businesses. And two, we need to diversify the toolbox. One of the things that Governor Raimondo did very successfully in the early days was to roll out a full suite of economic development tools. And in Providence, we should be doing the exact same thing, because right now, all we do is swing at the one nail that we have, which is the TSA. We need to have additional tools so that we can try to get deals done, try to attract new businesses, try to support growing businesses, and have a different tool in the toolbox to meet the needs than just the one TSA. And so I'm committed to both of those things, which is to make progress on our commercial rate and to diversifying the economic development toolbox, so that in conjunction with a clear plan for economic growth in our city, we've got tools to actually help achieve those goals. And I think we can do that early on.
Your thoughts on the tangibles rate, which is again another one of those taxes that impacts a lot of small businesses on equipment and the like, particularly for those that may be involved in wholesale distribution and the like. Any relief in the offing under your administration on the tangibles?
Yes, I hope so. It is certainly another burden, and it's not just a financial burden, although it is. It's also a huge administrative burden, and I'm convinced that there's a wide range of compliance. The city doesn't really inspect, and so I think you've got people who do the right thing and accurately assess and pay. I think you've got other people who maybe don't, and so what I'd like to be able to do is make progress both on the rate, but also on simplifying the process. And perhaps like we've done with the state minimum corporate tax, where we've started to exempt up to a certain level, maybe we can do that with the tangibles, so that very small businesses just fall off altogether. Other businesses can pay some sort of flat fee minimum rate and have no administrative burden, no nonsense. And then the really big complex ones, the city receives a lot of tax revenue, for example, from National Grid for their tangible property, which is significant and complicated. So we can't do away with it. But there are certainly going to be ways to both simplify, provide some relief, and maybe even exempt some very small players so that they have one less thing to worry about.
Brett Smiley, thank you so much for being with us today on Chamber TV, talking about just a handful of issues. I'm sure we could have talked forever and ever and ever about so many really fascinating topics, but I know we will have you back again very soon. You are invited to come and join us at any point and talk about and get feedback on any of the key issues that you think that the members of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce should be aware of, and also to get feedback and continue the work that we've been doing all along with business community engagement. So anything you want to leave us with, Brett, before
Well, maybe just on that point, thank you very much. I would love to come back. And for those who maybe I don't get a chance to meet in person, but see this online, my website's smileyformayor.com. There's a bunch of issues and policy positions there. There's also ways to contact me. So if you have feedback along the way and I'm not going to see you at a chamber meeting, email address, phone number, contact us form at smileyformayor.com. Would love to hear your feedback. Thank you, Laurie.
Fantastic. Okay, we will see you again. And for now, have a great day.